had a gallbladder attack 2 years later without a gallbladder. And I'm asking my inner wise self, what do I do? And she's like, you go to emergency. And I'm like, I don't want to go to emergency. And she's, you go to emergency. Okay, okay. But it was my body telling me, this does not fit, Kim, right? You cannot be in a space that isn't authentically you. There has to be a match with your values, this ethos of care and fairness. So that was the real wake up call.
Get ready to reclaim your life, discover inspiring stories, practical tools, and the path to true happiness. This is Reclaim Your Life with Irina. Let's begin the journey. Hello and welcome to Reclaim Your Life with Irina. Today we have a special guest, Kim Korven, joining us from Regina, Canada. Kim is a retired lawyer and judge of landlord and tenant disputes, a mom, divorcee, and mediator who supports families in conflict. Unlike anyone else in this industry, Kim does not approach divorce as a legal issue. Instead, she helps parents stop walking on eggshells so they and their children can thrive during and beyond divorce. This is a true event, even challenging circumstances such as coercive control, narcissism, and mental health issues. Kim lives in Regina, Canada with her second husband, one of her adult children from her first marriage, and rescue greyhounds and cats. Kim is the third generation of her family to steward 160 acres of prairie. Welcome, Kim. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Irina. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah. So please share with us in your own words, who is Kim?
Oh, Kim is this, Kim's somebody who wears a mask still, to a certain extent, but I wore a mask for years and years. And I think, the whole perfection mask. So in my family, I was the smart one. So, excelling academically, but, I grew up on a farm too. So I did everything. And even driving the tractor, I had to be good at it, or the combine. There was no space for half measures. And it was primarily, living in my head, because at our family dinners, we'd discuss politics. There was no space for feelings. So I think, so yeah, I'm a recovering perfectionist, I think. Yeah. Mhm. And a recovering and somebody who's learning to experience emotions. So there you go, and express them.
Very well said. Yeah, because we don't actually learn about emotions unless until something happens in our life that causes us to kind of examine our life and maybe figure out what is this? What is this emotions? Because we don't talk about it when
Well,
we're
and
growing up.
yeah, and I remember the first time I did the Myers-Briggs test,
Mhm.
I was about 20. And in terms of the thinking and the feeling, I was 19 on the thinking side and one on feeling. And I remember then realizing that when I would even try to talk about emotions, I would say, I think I'm feeling. That's how out of touch I was with the whole emotions. So yeah, we don't learn about them.
No, no. What are you passionate about?
I'm passionate. My biggest passion is actually kids, and not in. So growing up, the other thing about me, and this relates to my passion, was my parents had to get married. Um, it was the early 1960s, and my mom ended up pregnant with
Mhm.
my brother, and she'd been raised Catholic. So my parents were young, and I came along shortly after my brother. There wasn't a lot of money, lots of shame in terms of having to get married. My mom's parents even wrote her a letter saying, we no longer have a daughter,
Mhm.
because this happened. So there was not a lot of capacity, I think, to really. be present for us. And I mean, the boxes were ticked off, right? Like, yeah, read us stories, we got bathed. It wasn't a bad life, but they weren't, I don't think they really saw me. Like, there was too much going on for them. And I had a great grandmother who we would go, she lived in the same community as us. So we would go and eat at her house every Sunday. And she would, she'd cook boring pork chops for my parents, and she'd make Norwegian meatballs for my brother and me and mashed potatoes. And I think my mom used to get so angry because I would eat cooked peas and carrots that my great grandma made. But at home, it was like, you cannot force me to do that. No way. No, no, no. And it was this, from her, I experienced unconditional love. And I think it was possibly the very, very different experiences there that really made me passionate about kids and wanting kids to experience unconditional love. Okay. So even when I used to coach judo, because as a teenager, I was this competitive, very fierce, very nasty competitor in judo. And when I got back into it coaching after I had kids, it was just to create this safe space. And our club was in the inner city. And it's why I do the work I do with parents going through divorce, is so kids aren't forgotten. And because I really, really strongly believe we need more peace in our homes. And it's that conflict. And conflict, of course, like my parents didn't fight, but there was this tension. And even tension undermines a child's feelings of self-worth and wondering, who am I? So that's the really, really big passion, the number one passion. There are more. Otherwise, I wouldn't own 160 acres of prairie. That is saying, hey, the natural world matters in its natural state, not to be used by humans, but because it was created that way.
Mm-hmm.
And the plants and the animals need natural places. And what we tend to forget, we need natural places too. That's part of our healing. So I guess those are the two big passions, Irina.
I love it. What makes your heart sing?
Well, what makes my heart sing? It is, I remember the first mediation session I did with this couple, and there had been significant mental health issues and lots of, and then some violence. So the other parent was completely terrified of not wanting the child to be with the other parent. And what was so beautiful was by the end of our sessions, I remember we met in a coffee shop and they brought their child, their 2-year-old child, and we had a celebration, the four of us, and it was just the healing. And it's witnessing and facilitating that kind of healing really makes my heart sing. Sometimes growing giant pumpkins makes my heart sing too, right? It's not all heavy. It's, yeah, it's seeing life. Good life.
Beautiful. Yes. We have, I call it, different passions and different things that make our heart sing, and it's important to practice those.
Well, and it's interesting. Like, so a few years ago, I was at the garden center, and it was late in the season, but there was this Dill's Atlantic giant pumpkin plant, little, to put in the garden. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try this because I had been interested in them years before. I'd actually had seeds for 10 years that I never did anything with, and then threw out the seeds. So I try this with this pumpkin, and and it's growing to be a huge plant, and all kinds of male blossoms, no female blossoms until the first weekend in August. And then I was mowing my lawn and I knocked the blossom off. And I didn't have it in my heart to pull out the plant because I'm thinking it's too late in the season. We have our growing season here is about 100 days usually. So that's way late in the growing season for a pumpkin to start. I'm like, there's no point in this. But I left the plant in the ground. And August 25th, there was 4 female blossoms, and I pollinated them all with a paintbrush. And the plant actually killed 3 of the little pumpkins, which I found fascinating that the plant was that sentient. But the 4th one, the squirrels were trying to eat it by late September. I had to Google, how do I protect my pumpkin from the squirrels, and learned I had to Vaseline it. And so October 2nd, and I would cover up the plant at night to protect it from frost. It took 7 sheets. Plant was so big. And October 2nd, when I harvested the pumpkin, who I named Harold, um, he was 55 pounds.
Oh, wow.
from, from August 25th to October 2nd. And seeing that growth actually just really did fill my heart with joy. It was, what was nice is I work in a heavy area.
Mhm.
So it was just so beautiful. And the other thing that was beautiful for me was going, as humans, we push and we push and we push. I got to do this. I got to do this. And here you have this life that's kind of going, screw you. I'm going to do this on my own time, in terms of female blossoms. And then just the miracle, all I had to do was give it water. It had soil, it had sunlight, and it grew. And it was right, and I'm thinking, I can learn from this pumpkin to have faith, right? And that we grow when we're meant to grow.
You're right. I think planting is fascinating. It's like you have the seeds and you put them in the soil and just put a little water, and then you have a beautiful plant, and it produces a beautiful fruit. I planted, I haven't done pumpkin, but I did squash,
Oh, yes.
the orange ones, the big ones.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Also fascinating, from nothing, from this little thing, and you have this
I
big.
know, right? And we tend to think as humans that we can control our lives and that we do this and it has to be so regulated. But nature has a much different plan.
Yeah.
It's just, and I grew 2 more pumpkins last year because I kept some of the seeds from Harold,
Mhm.
and I had them in an area with a fence so that the dogs couldn't dig them out. They wouldn't grow. I had to remove the fence,
Mhm.
and that's when they started growing. And I've never before thought of plants as being really sentient beings.
Mhm.
So it's that learning from the life around us.
Yeah.
And I guess that's something that I'm passionate about, is this profound curiosity always. Um, and the other thing, of course, about nature is, like you say, like you plant the seed in the soil, you give it water, you largely ignore it. And look what happens. It's a miracle.
Yeah. What makes you happy?
Well, a good cup of coffee first thing in the morning is quite lovely. Um, but in all seriousness, I spent a lot of years not being happy. and completely judging myself. I didn't realize until after I was out of it that the whole time I was in the legal profession, I suffered from anxiety, right? It was just this constant, unrelenting fear and thinking, oh, I've done something wrong. I'm going to be found out. I'm going to be punished. I've missed a case. So happiness, and in that era, I think happiness was buying a nice suit, having some of the toys. And what has shifted in terms of happiness is like I have a real detailed morning practice now. I do the miracle morning that Hal Elrod started. But I've meditated, like my dad took me to learn to do transcendental meditation. I think I was about 12.
Mm-hmm.
So I've known how to meditate for over 40 years. And periodically I do it, and I've read Pema Chodron, and those practices help me actually find some joy. Happiness, it's like, the good old, I wouldn't have had time as a lawyer to really enjoy Harold, for example, or even to enjoy my kids. So happiness for me can be laughing because my daughter is 19. She's writing a university final today. But it's the simple things, sitting down for a meal with my family. And why I'm laughing is because I've been cooking again lately. And she's, Mom, you've cooked 3 times this week. Wow. And even I'm thinking back to Mother's Day when she was 5, and she brought me breakfast in bed. And the breakfast was special case cereal and a glass of orange juice. And the special case cereal, she knew I liked brown sugar, so there was brown sugar on it. But she used the wrong milk. There was buttermilk. She used the buttermilk. Yeah. So it was this brown sugar and sour buttermilk. And I could have, of course, said, oh, you got this wrong. And I just said thank you. And it's one of my happiest memories that at 5 she did that for me.
Mm.
It's those little things, the family dinners, seeing Harold grow. I have lots of house plants, and when my Hoya blooms or gets a new leaf, that causes, this profound, and happy isn't, for me, it's not this, oh, yay, 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 yay. It's this deep kind of grounding. And sometimes after a really good discussion with clients, that makes me happy too. Or a good well, I love conversation. Good conversation makes me happy too. Let's be frank. So
You're right. It's not about the big moments. It's about the day-to-day things that are general things, but if they make you happy,
well, and
paying attention to those things and
yeah, and
being
what's
present.
in being present, and what's kind of sad about our relationships today is, like, when I do mediation, I always have not always, almost always, we almost craft a eulogy, because for so long people have been focused on the negative and what the other person's doing wrong. And of course, you love this person at one time. You get married expecting the marriage to last. And then it's like there's been a train wreck go through your family, like there's been a death of the marriage. So I always get people to share their best memories. And what's really interesting is sometimes the memories, the really good memories at the time, were really, really difficult moments. But now they can laugh about But the sad thing is that they haven't talked about them ever before. So it's like they've been on two separate railroad tracks. And I think if people took the time, perhaps even to share weekly, well, what brought you joy this week? Or what's the best thing, right, that happened this week? There'd be better connections, which of course would lead to less tension and better homes for kids. But also, I think happier adults. I just think, can you imagine what the world would be like if we were happier at that kind of profound level and finding the joy in the little things, seeing them?
Totally. Unfortunately, our mind always focuses on the negative and we forget the positive, or we take it for granted. Like I took for granted walking until I dislocated my knee. And I'm totally fine now. So now when I walk, I say, thank you, my knees, for supporting me.
Well, and it's
something simple, or the fact that, you're breathing and talking and having conversation now. Something simple.
well, and I have Fuchs dystopia, which the pumps in the cornea don't work right. So my eyes actually go in and out of focus several times a second. And it's going to be, I'm either going to go blind or end up with a cornea transplant in both eyes. And it's my husband, like I saw a specialist a few months ago. And he's like, what did the specialist say? And I'm like, well, he said that I have a bit of cataracts and, we'll just end up doing it all at the same time when it's needed. And my husband's freaking out. And I'm like, well, I can see now. And I live in this world where we have this wonderful technology that will help me. And even I bought a new computer monitor in January with really good resolution. And my eyes just say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because on my laptop, I mean, forget it. It's really hard going. And I know like the first time I really started focusing on the positive in dark times was after I separated from my first husband. And the kids were with me. The kids live with me, yeah. But every night when I put them to bed, we would say thankfuls. We each had to say two things we were thankful for from that day. And I remember my daughter, such a card. She was maybe 3. And at the end, she said, "Hey, Nuss." But that was when I started kind of a gratitude practice. And I also, a few years ago, I started a practice of every day writing down 5 things I like about me. And that was from the Hay House World Summit in 2013. I bought so I could have the recordings. And I'd listened to Anita Morjani's maybe 4 times. And I listened to it again 2 or 3 years ago. And I heard her say, oh, yeah, writing, 5 things you like about yourself every day. And it was incredible doing it because I started with the intellect, right? Because that's what everybody else always valued in me. And I realized I wasn't liking anything about my body. And I could hear my mom's voice saying, well, you're big boned. You have thick ankles. And so I went, okay, isn't this interesting? So I started actually going every day. There has to be something I like about my body. And it isn't 5 things I like about me anymore. It's now 5 things I adore about me.
I think it's a beautiful practice, and you gotta remind yourself instead of self-criticizing, what are the things that you love about yourself.
Well,
and time you start appreciating them.
Well, and the real difference, of course, I was still when I first listened to Anita, and most of the times I listened to her, I was still heavy in that law world, the legal practice world, um, even, doing the hearings for landlord and tenant disputes. I couldn't hear that message. There was too much anxiety, and it wasn't a good fit for me, right? So I couldn't hear what she was saying. But when I was ready, it sunk in. Because I think the other thing is there's a tendency to beat ourselves up. Well, why didn't I do this sooner? Because you didn't. It wasn't the right time. It's okay.
Sometimes we gotta hear the same message 100 times, and maybe on the 100th time we will hear it, we'll be ready for it. And maybe
Well,
a different person because they said something that kind of struck a note in you that finally you could recognize. Not just you, anybody.
well,
We hear a message many times.
and I think it's like that seed, right? Like you don't put a seed in soil, it doesn't germinate immediately.
Yes. Yeah.
So and putting a seed in soil, I mean, you don't just leave it if it's in a pot, right? You make sure it has water because if it dries out, if it's germinated, it's going to die before you see the sprout. And it's the same with us. And if we can remember that, but and you're right, the brain, of course, is doesn't sink in. It takes time. But we can be seeds too, ideas and new practices.
Totally. What was the moment in your life that caused you to wake up, that you suddenly realized that you needed to change something about the way you were living?
Well, I think there were a number of things that were going on that I refused to listen to. You know, I'm in control. I know what I want. I have this career. This is life. Um, and in 2015, I got sick. And I mean, I was, visiting a doctor. We couldn't figure out what was wrong, but I would be in such pain, right? Like I couldn't sleep lying down. I would be on the couch, leaning up against the side of the couch, and two extra strength Advil, they'd last for about 30 minutes. And I could hardly eat. And it ended up, what it was I had a 10 millimeter gallstone in my bile duct. So it was almost a half inch in diameter, which is really, really huge. And it took three, like there was two ERCPs and a surgery, like well, it was spyglass, so still down my throat, but full anesthesia to get it out. And then my gallbladder left in 10 weeks later. Like when I went to the hospital to emergency, because a friend of mine said, yeah, Kim, I was waiting for an MRI for a long time. And if things get worse, just go to emergency. You'll get the treatment you need. That's kind of how the system here works, where you end up on this long wait list. And so my urine was almost the color of tea when I went. So, I mean, I was really, really sick. And I continued. I had a gallbladder attack 2 years later without a gallbladder. And I'm asking my inner wise self, what do I do? And she's like, you go to emergency. And I'm like, I don't want to go to emergency. And you go to emergency. Okay, okay. But it was my body telling me, this does not fit, Kim, right? You cannot be in a space that isn't authentically you. There has to be a match with your values, this ethos of care and fairness. So that was the real wake up call. And my daughter now, she'll say, like, Mom, I was afraid you were going to die. And I'm like, looking back, oh yeah, I could have very easily. And and I remember even I used to have a ganglion cyst, and this is like 20 years ago, and I had an appointment to get it removed. I'm looking at the scar. It's a huge scar for right like 1:30 in the afternoon. Well, I was in court that morning on this application, and I had my client, and it went late. So my client drove me to the hospital where the procedure was going to be. And there was about an hour from when court ended because it was a detailed application, and the surgeon started working on me. And just local anesthetic. Well, it wouldn't stop bleeding. He had to sew it up 4 or 5 times. My blood pressure was that high. And he was completely nervous, right? Because he's worried this lawyer's going to sue him. And I'm like, I know you're not going to let me leave until it's done. It's okay. It's okay. And I think I had a hearing the next day in another community that my client had to drive me to. It was a complete crazy life. No wonder my body finally said, Kim, you can't be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
There's way too much adrenaline in all of this. It's not healthy for you. So I'm just saying my body was giving me messages, that I was like, nope, nope, nope. So that was how the wake up started. And for somebody who lived primarily in my head, I wasn't about to listen to my body. Like, no way. So the screaming kept getting louder. Right. And listen to me, like I grew up on the farm where, like the pigs we raised, we ate. We butchered chickens like very, very, in addition to gardening and milking a cow. But it was not this, it was pretty brutal in terms of, it's just they're there to be raised for food without question. And so for me to have evolved to this, well, look at this, my body was giving me messages. Look at this pumpkin plant. It's sentient. Is a real a huge, huge shift over the years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for some reason, I've actually never been happier. I mean, I still like I worry about money and where's the next client going to come from? And but overall, I am much more grounded and much more whole. Um, right? I can embrace the emotions and the spiritual part and see more connections. So it's good.
Good, good. What were the 3 biggest lessons you learned as a result of your wake-up call?
The 3 biggest lessons. Well, the really big one is I need to be true to me. And I think the second one that I'm still learning is that is so very tough in our society to be true to oneself. So very tough. Like it's a daily practice, not even daily, sometimes several times a day. And I'm just thinking of that first one, to be true to me, is really going, crap. If I'm not true to me, I'm going to die. I'm going to get really, really sick. And, I have these kids in my life that I really, really love, and a husband. And so it's like, so stay here. Okay. So keep doing Because it's not sexy to be true to yourself. From the outside, it looks good, but it's tough work. And the third thing, I think the really biggest learning is faith. Because it's not something to do on my own. And that's what I struggle with the most. So this isn't, like this is I'm being real. But I think and I'm just thinking I'm going to give you a fourth one too. The fourth one is it's the relationships that matter way more than the stuff and the possessions, right? It's those relationships founded on love. It's coming back to that. Has been the real gift. Does that make sense?
Totally. I love it. I love it. The being true to yourself. Because for years, if we are peacemakers, we're trying to satisfy everybody and we forget about ourselves, or we wear different kind of masks that we show. And when you live with somebody, you become like that other person, and sometimes you lose yourself if you weren't true to yourself. And of course, two people come into relationship from different set of values and beliefs, and sometimes the compromise is needed. But if that compromise is going against your core values and your core beliefs, I think that when we need to kind of stop and ask ourselves, like, what am I doing? Because if we don't, if time would pass, we turn around, we're not gonna recognize ourselves anymore.
Well, and when I talk to one of the things that really makes me sad in my work is I'll be on a call with somebody who wants to work with me, and just the description of what's going on, I know it's coercive control. And coercive control, that's when women are most likely to be murdered. Okay. And I know in Canada, 53% of women are murdered in their homes, right? Like that's the danger place for women. So I am telling them about coercive control, but I'm also saying to them, you need to pay attention to your body. And it isn't, do I look good? Oh, I'm gaining weight. It's what are the sensations in your body? And in terms of being true to yourself, even like as a people pleaser, and because that's how we're raised, and you're right, when we're sensitive and we don't want to, oh, it'll make it worse. I can't say, or there's going to be this big outburst, because that was me in my first marriage. And even I think as a child too, about, well, if I show up as me, I won't be loved, right, with my parents. Whereas my great grandma, she knew who I was. But it's this, and I'm losing my train of thought because that happens every now and again. The whole thing about the sensations in the body, that's our early detection system. So with the people pleasing, like I feel it, I would feel it, and the anxiety as this heavy, heavy, dark weight in my stomach. And right now I'm having tendonitis in my shoulder, right shoulder, and I'm like, what's going on? That's deeper. So now at least I'm seeing, oh, there's a connection here to the emotional realm. And it's if we pay attention to those sensations in our body, we stay safe and we can stay on track. And it doesn't have to be attaching meaning to them or stories. It's like, oh, it's like this curiosity about my shoulder. I'm like, okay, it's tight. I just need to be open. I don't have to know why. And my yoga practice this morning, it was about, oh, the shoulders are attached to the heart chakra. and letting love in. And I'm like, oh, the messages are coming about the shoulder. Okay. And what's a really interesting corollary benefit to me learning to be true to me is my son, because he finished university last year and he's kind of an idiot savant as a musician, perfect pitch. He can hear something and play it. So his degree's in music, and he had a chair in the symphony for 2 years. Now, as he was graduating, of course, his profs are saying, you need to go do your master's. Okay. And he decided, he's like, playing music like this isn't fun. So he's off in the reserves of the armed forces. But he was being true to him. And I contrast him to when I graduated law school way back when and wanted to do my master's in Scotland. But I'm like, oh, my mentor said, Kim, you need to practice for a couple years first. And I listened to them and totally lost heart and totally went down a path and I go, look at this. My son has seen me go back to law school to get my master's as part of reclaiming me. He's seen me leaving the conventional workplace. Like he saw me get sick. He saw me try many different jobs trying to fit in. And eventually go, no, I have to do this way, not as a lawyer. And so there he is, 23 years old, being true to himself. And I'm like, I've done something right as a parent, right? Without even trying.
Totally. Yes. Yes. Sometimes it's not what you say, but what you do, and the fact that they get to experience you in everything, that's the best part.
Well, and right. And with our kids, if we show up real
Yeah.
and own our stuff, like I've been known to tell my kids, oh, yeah, okay, I'm tired. So be careful how you're behaving because when I'm tired, I'm cranky and I'm nasty. I'm short-tempered. But we talk about, you can love somebody and not like their behavior. That's part of it. Human beings, you're not going to like their behavior all the time. But the kids watch what we do. They're sponges. So,
Totally.
as,
And I do love your other lessons as well, still learning. No matter how old you are, we're still learning about ourselves and about the world. And there is never end to that because there is more depth to different aspects of living, of how we experience things and how we relate to one another. Relationships you mentioned because we don't really learn the relationship aspect of things. We come out of school and we learn all about like the subjects, but we never learn anything kind of worthwhile that is necessary for us to kind of live life. How to make money or how to relate to one another. What happens if an unfortunate event occurs? How do you deal with the emotions and with all those different aspects of living? All that we don't really learn until
well, and when we don't learn even that people are going to disagree, that's part of life. And it doesn't make us enemies. And we don't learn how to have like what's counterintuitive in a dispute is to be able to say, I am sorry I did this. Or I am, not I'm sorry you reacted this way. That's an alt apology. But to own it and say, I'm sorry I hurt you. Those are power words in a conflict because they bring people together. And it's really unfortunate that we don't learn that. right? About the disagreement is actually a way to weave stronger relationships.
Yes, yes. When you were growing up, did you have a hero or somebody you looked up to?
Well, good question. My great grandma, right, was one. Um, I loved the book Robin Hood, right? Robin Hood with the whole notion of fairness. And some of my judo coaches, I think, would be my role models.
Nice. And what were the qualities of the people you looked up to, you wanted to emulate for yourself?
Well, my great grandma, it was just that profound sense of love and acceptance that I felt in her presence. I mean, Robin Hood, it was all about fairness and that courage to protect the weak was really, really strong. And my judo coaches, I think it was just, because they believed in me and I didn't want to let them down. So there you go.
Those are amazing qualities. Who did you want it to be when when you were growing up?
Well, that changed. When I was 5, I wanted to be a go-go dancer. But, I never shared that one with my parents. And it got much more prosaic. By the time I graduated high school, I wanted to be a farmer. And I was a farm activist. And, yeah, that's what I wanted to be. But I'd seen this poster on a board at my high school about a youth exchange. And I just felt this strong sense that it was something I had to do. So I applied and I went on a youth exchange to Indonesia. It was a group program. And there you go. Yeah, I would not have done well studying agriculture at university. Sciences were my worst classes. So it was a good escape.
But it's beautiful, like an experience, to experience another culture, another country, to open up your worldview, when you were in one place and like see how other people are living and be.
Oh, it was incredible.
What was the
And
most memorable thing about that?
I think it's that people are people, right? And that sense of curiosity and that a sense of warmth will carry you through. And what was very cool was during the lockdown, I got this message from this person on Facebook or a friend request, and I didn't recognize the name, so I ignored it. Then this person sent me a message asking me if I had participated in this youth exchange. And I said yes. Well, the person who was contacting me was my exchange sister, and she was born when we were living with her family. And, like I didn't even know my Ibu, my mother, was pregnant. She wore a sarong. Like we were in a remote village in Borneo.
Mhm.
And my counterpart and I don't know where we were, out working or doing whatever one day. And I mean, the village, there was no running water, no electricity, the packed earth streets, wood frame houses, but it was very simple. Um, we came home one day and there was a new baby. And that was the person who'd contacted me.
Oh,
And it was just so beautiful to reconnect. And even like they didn't have a camera. So with modern technology, I took photos of the pictures I have of the family and shared them with them. Their father had just passed on. it was, yeah. So we're still friends on Facebook, of course. But it was just this almost a homecoming sense.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful, having that experience. Amazing. What was the smallest thing you've done that had the biggest impact in your life so far?
Well, I think so. When my son was in grade 2, there was a student teacher with the regular teacher. And I bought sting. I had a friend whose daughter was in Cayman Islands and knew of these, blown glass earrings that were like $10 US a pair. I had bought 15 pair, I think, to give to different people for Christmas presents. I gave a pair to the teacher, grade 2 teacher, and I gave a pair to the student who was assisting teaching. And I remember when I did it, she's like, "Oh, I don't have pierced ears." And I felt so stupid. Like, how could I not have known that? This gift is completely useless. So fast forward 5 or 6 years, I'm at the school in the staff room cooking maybe green eggs and ham for my daughter's class. And there's a substitute teacher in the staff room, and she looks kind of familiar. And she came up to me and, "Are you Nathan's mom?" Yep. Well, it was the student teacher. And she told me that I was the only parent who bought her a Christmas gift that year. And it was so meaningful for her. She got her ears pierced. And when she got married, she wore those earrings. And for me, it was, we never know the key learning, those small, small acts of kindness. What big impact they have.
Totally.
Like I was so blown away when she shared that with me that, like because at the time I remember feeling shame and embarrassed that I got her a bad gift. And it was just the simple act of seeing her as a human and recognizing her was enough.
Totally. You never know what you can encourage or what you can spark by something. So, yay.
Mhm.
What is your superpower?
I think my superpower is likely the spreading love and acceptance. Because people who work with me or talk with me, they're, "Oh, I feel so much calmer, Kim." And it actually is really great to see people where there's lots of conflict, to feel, "Oh, yeah, the conflict has decreased," and to see them able to talk. And so it isn't related to my brain at all. I thought my brain was my superpower for a zillion years. It's my heart. It comes from my heart.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it takes time to recognize that because yeah, all the time we're in our head.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
What do you want to create next? Any fun projects you're working on that you like to share?
Well, there's a couple fun projects. The project, there's more conventional ones. I'm going to start with a project that's really in my heart. And when I was 4, my grandmother, we didn't live at the farm yet, but my brother and I, we were at the farm staying with our grandparents, and I had a security blanket that went everywhere with me. And one night when I went to bed at the farm, it disappeared. And it was a really significant trauma event. And none of the adults around saw it as trauma. It was just, oh, you'll find it one day. Or, oh, yeah, well, it's time for you to outgrow it, whatever. But there was none, oh, Kim, I'm so sorry for your loss. So around the time I separated from my husband and I was seeing a therapist, I shared this, and she had me go back in time as adult Kim and be an advocate with grandma because, it had to be grandma. She was the one who would complain about kitty blanket being dirty and say you need to throw it out. So to be an advocate for little Kim and this profound sense of relief and release of, an opening up of energy from that. But it didn't feel complete. And I remember I went home that day and I wrote an ending to the story. I wrote it out as, adult Kim going back. And for years, I've thought about publishing my kitty blanket story because I've shared it with different people over the years. And I mean, one woman I shared it with 3 years later, she was, what have you done with your story? And so it's finding the courage. I suspect I'm going to end up self-publishing, but anybody, I think, who wasn't seen as a kid and who had, trauma isn't just the big stuff. Like if you've read Dr. Benjamin Hardy's Personality Isn't Permanent, it isn't, like just, oh, I was sexually assaulted. No, it's these little things like a parent or a grandparent taking your blanket and throwing it out. Or, it's the little stuff that we hold on to and that keeps us from claiming who we are. So I want to publish it. That's the real love story for me. Because and it isn't logical, like it's not your typical story. And so the voices in my head and conventional wisdom is, well, you can't publish this. It doesn't fit, but it's welling up in me again. And I say welling up, like that was like when I ended up actually doing my master's. It was this long held dream. So that's coming out. And then I have a group program, not a program, it's a community for women going through divorce. And I call it Cake Life, because when you have dealt with a lot of crap in life, you can let it hold you down and see yourself as a victim, or you can go, whatever. So Cake Life stands for conflict as kindness every day. But there's also the fact that it's a community of women who are authentic, kind, and empowered. And part of it is I facilitate a sister circle with a love seat. So it's women supporting women who know. And it is just such a beautiful, beautiful, energetically, but to witness it, it's just so uplifting. And I think every woman going through divorce needs to be in Cake Life because the fact is, there's lots of industries that make money off of people seeing themselves as victims. And it's like, no. Like, life is full of hard times. It's okay. But when you have that community with empathetic witnesses, you can move through it so much faster and be a stellar example for your kids. So those are the two big passion projects that are on the go.
I love that. And you're totally right, about sharing your story. Because you could help so many people who have gone through that by sharing your experience and how you dealt with it and how it allowed you to, release that energy and to be able to experience better way of living by dealing with the pain.
Yeah. And, and even every time I read it, that story, I cry. It's still this profound relief. And because yeah, like it's just, you're right. It's something that could help people. So I need to forget conventional wisdom, right? And just self-publish is what you're telling me.
Yes,
Okay.
do it. I've done it. I done it 2 years ago. In April of 22, I became an author, a writer, and I shared my story. And it's been an incredible journey. I've done 5 books, and I'm working now on the solo book. I did contributions to other
Yeah.
compilations because I wanted to dip my feet first into the multi-author book to see what that book writing is all about. And now I feel I'm ready to do the solo book.
Well, you know what's funny is I have a thesis, right, from doing my master's,
Oh, there
and
you
it's
go.
on land titles. And I gave my mom a copy, and she said, it's a real book. I wasn't expecting a real book. Yeah, it's a real book. So I guess I have published before, haven't I? I have.
And writing, it's not only just sharing your story, but it also does something to you when you read. Like you said, you still read it and you still cry, it still affects you. And every time you read it, you actually healing yourself,
Mhm.
kind of reminding, where you've been and how you've lived and what happened. And I love your group community for women going through divorce. I think it is incredible, and there should be more of those like that.
Well, like I remember when I went through divorce, just feeling incredibly alone. And that was the hardest part. And so it's coming out of that great need that I had that wasn't met. It's like, okay. And what's really great is I've become part of the exchange community with John Berghoff and Adair Cates. So I'm learning how to facilitate better, which is very exciting for my community because it means, oh yeah, I can work with more, like in terms of small groups for women supporting women with generative questions. So I'm like, oh, this is so exciting to get more women in. Mhm, mhm.
Awesome, awesome. Is there anything I haven't asked that you would like to share?
Well, as you might have gathered, Irina, I really hadn't prepped for this. So it was like, okay, where do I feel like going today? I think so. The one thing I'm just going to share is I'm a conflict avoider at heart. Um, and I remember when I was like 18, my sister's 6 years younger than me, and she was wanting to borrow a pair of my pants, and she kept asking, and I kept saying no, and I kept getting more and more angry about her asking. And I finally said, look, you ask one more time, I'm going to take my socks off and stuff them in your mouth. And she was quiet for about 5 minutes. Then she asked again. So you know what happened. It was not an idle threat. So I went from that kind of passive aggressive, to being able to talk about conflict and sit with it. So my message is, if people can relate, to that, who I was, it's okay. You can get better at it. You don't have to see the other person as your enemy, right? If there's love, you don't have to like their behavior, and just to be kind to you and a sense of curiosity. There are some materials on my website, I think, that could help. But I think the first step is going, it's okay to be uncomfortable with this. It doesn't define you. So that's what I'll leave it with.
Yeah, Totally, totally. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your story on how you reclaimed your life and the lessons that you learned, that you need to be true to yourself. You are still learning and having faith that you don't have to do everything on your own. And finally, that relationship matter more than things.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And as I often say, you're only one decision away from reclaiming your life.
And I think the other thing, of course, is it doesn't have to be a big decision. Like we tend to think, oh, if I'm going to reclaim my life, it has to be this huge step. No, right? Like even I'm thinking my just, seeing that pumpkin plant was like, oh, okay. It actually had a profound impact. So take the small wins.
That's where it all begins, with small,
Hmm.
tiny steps.